Hi Guy, welcome back TV spoilers. What was Abby's sentence for Mariah when the truth was revealed? Young and the Restless spoilers. Fairmont Crest has always had a strange talent for disguising its rot behind a surface of order and luxury. But Genoa City has its own version of that illusioné bourbods that look peaceful enough to make people believe danger only belongs to strangers, not to family, not to those who have already been welcomed inside. And yet the truth about Dominic's kidnapping doesn't land like a passing shock. It lands like a fracture that keeps spreading, crawling deeper into every corner of the city, forcing everyone to face a nightmare wearing the face of someone once loved, once trusted, once considered safe. Abby is not the kind of woman who collapses easily. She has survived too many storms, too many moments when life tried to strip her of stability, dignity, and control. Each time, she rebuilt herself stronger, colder, more deliberate. But this time is different. This time, what is taken from her isn't a reputation or a contract or a relationship she can repair with time. What is taken is Dominic's child she has poured her heart into, the future she has protected like a vow, the fragile miracle she has fought for with everything she has. And what makes it unbearable isn't only that Dominic vanishes, it's that the person who carries him away is Mariah, someone who once stood close enough to be considered family, close enough to be held inside the circle of trust. Mariah doesn't walk into Devin and Abby's home as a stranger. She moves through it with familiarity, with accepted smiles, with a place that was granted almost unconsciously because everyone wanted to believe she had been through too much pain to ever inflict that pain on someone else. But lately, Devin has begun noticing something off about Mariah, something he cannot fully name. It's in the way her attention lingers too long on Dominic, in the way she asks the same questions repeatedly as if searching for a loophole in reality, in how her emotions spike at the smallest boundary. Devin wants to believe it is exhaustion, a vulnerable moment, a flare-up of old wounds. Abby feels something colder. Abby senses danger the way a mother senses a storm before the sky darkens. She doesn't want to accuse. She doesn't want to become the woman who sees threats everywhere. But she cannot pretend the air is normal when every instinct in her body is screaming that something is slipping beyond her reach. The truth is that Mariah has already slipped far beyond the point anyone imagined. She is no longer simply anxious or unstable. She is deeply affected by the hallucinations of Ian Ward's sick shadow that has chained itself to her mind like a parasite. When someone's perception of the world becomes warped, love can become a weapon. Safety can become a trap. And every helping hand can feel like an attempt to steal what little they believe they still own. In Mariah's mind, Dominic is no longer Devin and Abby's child. Dominic becomes her right, her destiny, the one thing that proves she matters. The thought of losing him does not feel like loss. It feels like extinction. That belief doesn't arrive as a choice, it arrives as a command. Mariah convinces herself she is protecting Dominic from Dinger. That exists mainly in her distorted reality, and by doing that, she justifies what cannot be forgiven. A quiet afternoon becomes the moment everything breaks. In Devin and Abby's home, life seems calm enough for a brief lapse. Calm enough for a single distraction. Devin is occupied for a moment. Abby's eyes leave Dominic for only minutes. And yet those minutes are enough for disaster to bloom. Mariah doesn't move like someone acting on impulse. She moves like someone who has rehearsed this 100 times in her head. Like someone whose plan has hardened into instinct. She lifts Dominic without noise, without hesitation, without leaving behind the kind of mess that signals panic. Then she is gone, slipping out of the house like a shadow. No warning, no apology, no trace. And when Abby returns, the emptiness hits her with the force of something physical, as if the air itself has been ripped apart. Abby's first emotion isn't fear. It is numbness. Her brain refuses to accept that this is real. She looks around as if Dominic will appear in some corner, as if the universe has simply played a cruel joke. But the longer she searches and finds nothing, the more fear floods in, cold, tight, suffocating. She calls Dominic's name, her voice cracking not because she is weak, but because something primal is awakening inside her. The survival instinct of a mother whose child has been torn away. Devin rushes in, and the instant he sees Abby's face, he understands that something is very wrong. They overturn the house in desperation, opening every door, checking every room, every shadow, every possible space where a child could be. There is nothing, only a heavy silence. The kind of silence that feels like the home is witnessing a crime it cannot stop. When Mariah's name rises between them, Abby changes. The compassion she had tried to preserve, the caution she had swallowed to keep peace. The warning signs she had forced herself to ignore, everything ignites into a rage, sharp enough to cut. Abby doesn't crumble into pleading. Abby becomes action. Her hands shake as she grabs her phone, but her voice is hard, almost terrifying in its clarity. She calls the police. She describes Mariah in detail. She explains the obsession, the instability, the pattern she can no longer pretend is harmless. And when someone on the other end asks if she is sure this is kidnapping, Abby answers like a verdict, she is sure. Christine takes the case urgently, and for Abby, Christine isn't just a prosecutor or an officer of the court. Christine becomes the embodiment of law. The force Abby clings to, because if she doesn't hold on to law, Abby fears what else she might hold onto. Christine begins mobilizing resources, media, telecalls, reports, canvassing, surveillance footage. Every faint lead brought into the light. Genoa City suddenly feels smaller, tighter, as if the entire place is holding its breath. A missing child exposes the cracks in safety that people prefer to believe don't exist. But Abby's focus isn't only on finding Dominic. It is on punishment. She knows what will come once Dominic is recovered. People whispering about Mariah's mental state, urging sympathy, claiming it was an episode, suggesting that Abby should soften. Abby can hear those excuses before they even arrive, and that makes her more rigid. She refuses to let the word understanding become a weapon used against her. Dominic is her son. He is not a prop in someone else's delusion. Abby looks at Christine as if she is handing her the last piece of control she has left. And she makes her demand with cold precision: criminal prosecution. No negotiation. No quiet arrangement. No second chances. Abby wants Mariah to pay for kidnapping her child. Devin tries to calm Abby, but he doesn't even know where to begin. He is terrified too. He is drowning too. But he cannot hate Mariah the way Abby does. Devin still sees the wounded parts of Mariah, the desperate person who once fought to be stable, who once wanted to belong. Devin sees her pain. And that pain makes it harder for him to say the word criminal without feeling something in himself twist. Yet every time he stares at the empty space where Dominic should be, reality crushes his hesitation. Dominic is gone. Dominic was taken. That fact cannot be rewritten into something softer. Devin wants Dominic home first. He wants to focus on safety and recovery before consequences. Abby cannot separate those things. For Abby, bringing Dominic home and locking Mariah away are the same mission. If Dominic returns but Mariah is not held accountable, Abby will never sleep again. Never breathe easily again, never trust any door to protect her family. The search spreads across Genoa City like wildfire. It is not merely an investigation, it becomes a collective fever. News travels too fast. Phones keep ringing. People who know Mariah begin replaying old conversations, trying to remember places she mentioned. Things she feared, signals they missed. The Newman family is shaken. The Winters family is shaken. These are families familiar with power struggles, scandals, and betrayal. But this is rawer than Thathis is a child vanishing in minutes. A nightmare that can happen inside the safest walls. They rally around Abby not because everyone agrees with her legal demands, but because Abby has become the center of the storm, and if Abby falls apart, the entire structure of family support collapses with her. Somewhere else, Mariah is hiding like an animal being hunted. She clutches Dominic so tightly it feels like she is trying to fuse him to her body. In her mind, Ian Ward's voice keeps feeding her fire, twisting her perception until she believes she is righteous. Mariah convinces herself that she is rescuing Dominic, that Devin and Abby are threats he must be saved from, that only she can protect him. She doesn't think of herself as a kidnapper. She thinks of herself as a savior. And that belief is what makes her more dangerous, because it means she won't respond to logic or guilt. In her distorted reality, returning Dominic isn't redemption, it is betrayal. As the hours stretch into something endless, tension begins to carve a new darkness between Abby and Devin. They love each other. They share the same mission. But they are standing on opposite banks of the same river, pulled apart by fear in different forms. Devin tries to keep his rational mind intact, reminding Abby that Dominic's safety is the priority, warning her that harsh legal pressure might drive Mariah into more desperate behavior. Abby does not want to hear it. Abby looks at Devin's caution and feels it as a kind of betrayal, not because Devin doesn't care, but because Abby needs her anger to survive this moment. The rage is her fuel. If Devin asks her to soften, Abby hears it as surrender, as permission for Mariah's crime to become understandable, and Abby refuses. Because she knows that once sympathy enters the room, the mother's grief becomes negotiable, and Abby will not let her child's trauma become a debate. Christine holds the line between empathy and duty, but even she feels the weight of this case. It isn't just kidnapping, it is a crime tangled with mental illness, hallucinations, and a name that has haunted too many lives. Every step must be measured because one mistake could put Dominic in danger. Abby doesn't want measured. Abby wants results. Abby wants action now. Not a slow legal process that asks her to be patient while her baby is out there, in the hands of someone unraveling. With every passing minute, Abby grows colder, sharper, more willing to become ruthless if that is what Dominic requires. In that long stretch of waiting, Abby begins replaying everything like a film full of razor blades. She remembers the way Mariah watched Dominic, the softness that now feels like a disguise, the strange comments that Abby dismissed to keep the peace. Abby blames herself for not acting sooner, for not drawing a harder boundary. She wonders if she should have forbidden Mariah from the house the moment she sensed instability. But guilt doesn't bring Dominic back. It only makes Abby cling more fiercely to prosecution. Because she believes that if she hesitates again, she could lose Dominic forever. Devin's own conflict grows heavier. He is torn between protecting his family and grieving what Mariah has become. He knows Abby is right about the crime. He knows Dominic must be recovered and Mariah must face consequences. But Devin also knows Mariah once mattered to them. And that knowledge poisons every moment with a kind of sorrow that doesn't allow him clean anger. Devin tries to keep Abby from crossing into something extreme. But he also understands that the extreme might be the only thing holding her upright. He senses that when Dominic returns, if Dominic returns, the scars will not fade. The family will not simply move on. The trust they once had will be shattered beyond repair. The search becomes a night that refuses to end. Abby barely puts the phone down. She stays awake on pure adrenaline, her mind unable to rest because rest feels like negligence. Everyone around her can see it. Abby has changed. She is becoming a force that is both heartbreaking and terrifying. A mother who would burn down a city if it meant saving her child. She is no longer thinking in shades of gray. To Abby, Mariah is no longer someone who needs help. Mariah is a threat that must be eliminated from Dominic's life permanently. Meanwhile, Mariah continues to run, to hide, to cling to her delusion as if it is oxygen. She avoids light, cameras, familiar places. Dominic becomes her only truth. She can't hear the reality outside her own mind. She hears only the echo of Ian Ward, the whisper that tells her she is right and everyone else is wrong. She is not fighting Abby and Devin anymore. She is fighting the real world. Abby reaches the point where waiting becomes unbearable. In her head, images of Dominic crying in a strange place replay again and again until they feel like a punishment. Those images turn into vows. Abby will not let Dominic suffer longer. Abby will not allow Mariah to hide behind illness. Abby decides with an icy certainty that no matter how Dominic returns, she will not stop until the legal system has branded Mariah's actions for what they are. Abby wants the court to leave a mark that can't be erased, because she believes that without that mark, Mariah will always remain a shadow hovering near Dominic. When Christine begins receiving the first signs of a possible location, Abby is ready to move instantly, ready to rip through obstacles with her bare hands if necessary. Devin tries to restrain her, reminding her that strategy and coordination matter, that recklessness could make things worse. But Abby hears restraint as separation. She hears it as Devin holding her back from her child. Their eyes meet, and something fractures between them, not because they don't love each other, but because fear is forcing them into different shapes. And then, just as the tension grows so tight that even breathing feels dangerous, Christine delivers new information, seeming thin as a thread, but strong enough to stop Abby's heart for a single beat. Abby grips the phone so hard her knuckles whiten. Her eyes burn, not from tears but from a body pushing every drop of blood toward a single purpose, Dominic. Devin watches her and sees a hope, yes, but also something darker, sharper, more combustible. Because Abby no longer just wants Dominic home. Abby wants this to end Mariah. And in that exact moment, right before Abby can rush out the door, a colder thought slides through her mind like a blade. If Mariah is cornered, if she believes she is about to lose her baby forever, what will she do to Dominic? To make sure no one can take him away again. After the kidnapping, Genoa City was no longer a place where people could convince themselves that time alone would smooth everything over. Some events don't simply pass, they reshape the way people breathe, the way they look at each other, the way they hold their love. And for Abby, the moment Dominic vanished from her home transformed love into something sharp and cold, like a blade she had to keep in her hand just to survive. Dominic was brought back safely. Yes, but the truly terrifying part was that even after Abby held him again, she still couldn't exhale in any real relief. Because the deepest horror wasn't the frantic search or the panic in the hours that followed. The deepest horror was what Abby understood with brutal clarity: the most dangerous threat doesn't always come from an enemy. Sometimes it comes from someone you once called family. Mariah was still out there caught in hallucinations, slipping into impulsive behavior, lost in a mental storm that refused to loosen its grip. And Abby knew that one more crack, one more moment of weakness, one more opening in their guard and Dominic could become the target of another nightmare he never asked to be part of. Mariah didn't return from that ordeal as someone who had made a mistake and regretted it. She returned like someone drifting farther away from reality, trapped inside her own mind. The hallucinations of Ian Ward clung to her like toxic fog, poisoning every thought and blurring the line between right and wrong. Some mornings she could seem almost calm, only to unravel by afternoon. She could cry over missing Dominic, then speak moments later as if the baby still belonged to her. The most frightening thing wasn't that Mariah wanted to be dangerous, it was that she didn't understand she had become dangerous. In her warped perception, she wasn't doing harm. She was fighting for love, for belonging, for a truth only she could see. And that distorted conviction left Abby with no room to soften. Abby had once been capable of compassion, of weighing another person's pain and finding space for mercy. But when Dominic's safety was on the line, Abby didn't have the strength to be that version of herself anymore. Any kind of leniency felt like a gambling, and Abby could not gamble with her child just to prove she was still a good person. Devin carried a different kind of agony. He did not forget what Mariah had done, but he also couldn't erase the memory of who she used to be. He was pulled between two brutal truths: the instinct of a father who wanted to build an iron wall around Dominic, and the guilt of turning someone broken into someone condemned. Devin hated the way Abby began speaking about Mariah like she was nothing but a threat, because it made him feel as if they were burying a living person, a woman still breathing, still panicking, still drowning in illness. Yet every time Devin heard Abby bolt upright in the middle of the night to check on Dominic, he couldn't argue. He couldn't deny that Abby wasn't living normally anymore. She was living inside constant vigilance, where her heartbeat sounded like an alarm that never shut off. That was the price of motherhood in a world where trust had been shattered. And then their decision was met not as an emotional explosion, but as a cold and calculated step. The kind that feels less like a choice and more like a declaration of war. Abby and Devin spoke in secret, in long silences where even breathing felt heavy. They both understood that if they let human kindness carry the day, Mariah would still have openings, more cracks that could lead back to Dominic. And in Mariah's current state, she didn't need a grand scheme to become dangerous again. One panic attack, one hallucination, one sudden belief that Dominic was in danger and she could act impulsively all over again. Abby said it out loud as if it was a law of nature. Dominic needed absolute protection. Devin stayed quiet because he knew she was right. And yet he heard something in Abby's tone that chilled him. Abby no longer wanted to simply protect Dominic. Abby wanted Mariah erased from Dominic's life completely. Hiring Christine Blair was the moment the war became official. Christine wasn't just an attorney in Abby's eyes, she was the only path to certainty. Abby needed the legal system to build the wall that emotion could not. She sat across from Christine and presented Mariah's instability with the precision of someone who had reached the end of her patience. The hallucinations, the impulsive behavior, the kidnapping, the strange gaps in logic, the unpredictable reactions, all of it became Abby's argument. Sharpened into something undeniable, Mariah was a potential danger to Dominic. Devin added details with more caution, as if still trying to preserve a sliver of humanity in how they moved forward. But that only made the case heavier, because Devin couldn't deny the truth either. Mariah had shown she could not control herself, and even that alone was unacceptable when a child was involved. Christine began building their legal case like an architect building a fortress. She focused on risk, on the possibility of repetition, on the reality that Mariah's instability wasn't just emotional, it carried real physical danger for Dominic. Every piece of evidence was organized into a larger picture. Mariah was slipping, and her slipping had already crossed the line into something that could not be tolerated. Abby listened to Christine and felt something like relief for the first time, as if these legal words were medicine for her terror. She started to believe that if the court stood with her, she would finally breathe again. Devin felt something else rising in his chest, a deeper dread, because once the law stepped in, there would be no easy way back. They would have to prove Mariah unfit. They would have to turn her illness into a weapon. And Devin knew that once you raise a weapon, it cuts everyone, even the child you are trying to protect. The emergency hearing was called quickly, as if Genoa City itself understood that some threats cannot be allowed to linger. Mariah was forced to face accusations that were not only about what she had done, but about whether she was capable of motherhood at all, whether she was mentally stable enough to exist safely near Dominic. It was the kind of courtroom battle that didn't just destroy your reputation. It could destroy whatever remained of your identity. Mariah entered that courtroom not like a cold-blooded villain, but like a terrified woman clutching the last thread of her world. She tried to defend herself. She tried to insist she loved Dominic, that she had been misunderstood, that she only wanted to protect him. But the very way she struggled led to confusion, the fragmented responses, the haunted look in her eyes as if she was seeing something no one else could see came the strongest evidence Abby could have asked for. Every pause, every nervous misstep, every strange reaction made the judge's skepticism deepen. And Mariah, without even realizing it, helped solidify the case against her. Abby watched her with emotions colliding inside her chest. She was furious enough to want Mariah gone forever. But at the same time, something in Abby flinched at the sight of a person collapsing under public scrutiny. Abby didn't want to see Mariah fragile because if Abby saw it too clearly, compassion would creep in, and compassion right now felt like the most dangerous thing in the world. Abby had to stay cold. She had to turn pain into determination, emotion into logic, because if she didn't, she feared she might forgive, and forgiveness could cost Dominic everything. Devin watched too, and the exhaustion in his face was unmistakable. He wasn't defending Mariah, but he couldn't fully embrace cruelty either. He knew he was witnessing a human being dissected by the legal system, and even if it was necessary, he hated what it felt like. Christine pushed for the court to strip Mariah of all access to Dominic. Not restrictions, not supervised visits, a full severing. Christine also demanded a psychiatric evaluation, arguing that Mariah's condition needed to be assessed before she could be trusted in any capacity. That demand pushed Mariah into her most dangerous position yet: psychiatric hospitalization, or even prison if the court believed her actions warranted it. Abby felt a fierce rush of validation when Christine spoke those words, because someone was finally saying out loud what Abby herself could barely bring herself to admit. Mariah could never be allowed near Dominic again. Devin's stomach tightened. Psychiatric commitment or prison meant slamming every door in Mariah's life shut. Devin wondered if it was fair. But then he looked at Abby, at her clenched hands, her burning eyes, the desperation she carried like armor, and he understood. Fairness was no longer the priority. Safety was. And sometimes safety demands ruthless choices. The court's decision ultimately leaned toward Abby and Devin, at least for now. They gained custody. They gained full control over who could and could not approach Dominic. Abby should have cried with relief, but no tears came. Instead, she felt hollow, as if she had won a battle that left no true winner. Dominic was safe, yes, but someone else had been crushed in the process. Abby told herself Mariah had done this to herself, that Mariah kidnapped Dominic, that Mariah was dangerous. But those words didn't completely erase the jagged guilt lodged inside her. Devin couldn't erase it at all. He felt like they had saved their child and created a new wound in the family at the same time. Quiet divisions began spreading. Some people supported Abby and said she had done the only responsible thing, while others started looking at Abby as if she had been too cruel to a woman who was mentally ill. That division only made Abby feel more isolated, more convinced that only she truly understood what was at stake. And the cruelest part was that even when Dominic lay peacefully in his crib, Abby still couldn't stop hearing the echo of the kidnapping in her mind. She checked the locks again and again. She startled at passing cars. She stared at her phone like it might ring with news that Mariah had slipped out of treatment, or been released, or disappeared. Devin tried to hold Abby, to anchor her back to the present. But Abby wasn't living in the present anymore. Abby was living inside the anticipation of disaster. And deep down, she hated herself for it. She hated what she had become, Simeon, willing to use another person's illness as the very proof that destroyed them. But she hated the alternative even more, the possibility that if she didn't do it, Dominic would pay the price. That inner conflict had no clean escape. It only forged Abby into a stronger woman. In the most painful way possible, strong not because she wanted to be, but because she had no other choice. If there's one part of this story that sits in my throat and refuses to leave, it isn't the courtroom or the ruling, it's the idea of people being cornered into decisions that will make them look ugly in someone else's eyes. Abby didn't win out of selfishness. She won out of terror. Because motherhood turns love into a ruthless survival instinct when danger threatens a child. Devin didn't participate out of coldness. He stood beside Abby because he couldn't risk another moment where Dominic wasn't safe. And Mariah didn't fall because she was evil. She fell because the darkness inside her mind dragged her down. All three of them lost something in this war, and that is what makes it feel so heavy, so haunting. Dominic is protected, but is this truly the end of the nightmare? Or only the beginning of another chapter, a chapter where Mariah, now cornered by the court and crushed by isolation, might become even more desperate to prove she still belongs in Dominic's life? On our TV Spoilers channel. I always seek content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series. From the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting perspectives. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.